We have a former CIA station chief in Tel Aviv, Susan Miller, openly bragging about the fact that the CIA and the Mossad are partnering and working with Al Qaeda and ISIS in the Middle East to oppose and to weaken Iran. Take a quick listen to this.
Now we have to go to ISIS and Al Qaeda to go back against Iran. What I loved about working with the Israelis is they're very American. We could get into shouting matches during meetings sometimes, not like we're super mad, but we're trying to really say, well, my idea is best, well, my idea is best kind of thing. And then we'd be like, hey, you want to go have lunch? And we're all fine. You know, it was just it's a really nice place to work. They're good allies of ours. We need to protect them. I do know for a fact that that we argue sometimes with them, but I also know for a fact that we're committed to helping protect them, keep their state. You mean CIA and Al Qaeda worked closely together in Iraq
and Syria,
and
in Syria to overthrow Assad, of course.
To overthrow Assad and stuff like that. There were times when our covert action would allow us, findings would allow us to go and actually have meetings and talk to the quote unquote enemies.
Let's just stop right there. I promise I will play the rest of that clip. I mean, you know, none of this, when I say it's surprising, what I mean is it's shocking to see somebody say it so brazenly out in the open. It's not surprising the information that she's sharing. I think at this point, if you've been watching my channel and if you've been kind of aware of what the United States, the CIA is actually doing in the Middle East, stating that the CIA is backing these extremist groups in the Middle East, that's not, it shouldn't be surprising at this point. The brazenness of her saying this is what's truly just eye-opening. And yet the Western media pretends that this is not going on. The Western media, whenever events happen in the Middle East that lead to the tragic death of hundreds of thousands of Arabs across the Middle East, the Western media will then blame those governments, will blame basically every other force except for the CIA and the Mossad that gave them those weapons, gave them those ammunitions to conduct whatever the hell they did. You know, I've said this a lot before, actually. You will never find an Arab. You will never find an Arab politician. You will never find an Arab in general that supports either of those two groups that she just mentioned. I try not to say it too often because of the algorithm's weird. ISIS and Al Qaeda. You'll never find an Arab that you just simply won't. Actually, what you will find is if you ask Arabs about either of those groups, they'll tell you that ISIS is an American concoction. They'll tell you, they're like, we have no idea where the hell that came from. It's an American concoction. They're funded, trained, and armed by the CIA to destabilize the entire Middle East. Arab politicians in Jordan, in Palestine, I believe Saudi Arabia as well. Was it a Saudi official? Both have all came out and started saying that this doesn't represent Islam. One thing they'll always say, and they'll always say that this is a manufactured, or these are manufactured organizations, which is exactly what the CIA and the Mossad use them for. You know that the ISIS never actually attacked Israel. There was a time that they accidentally did, and they apologized. And then a former IDF officer, an IDF officer at the time, then accepts their apology. Do you guys remember this? This is like headlines. If you search up ISIS apologizes to Israel, you'll find articles that say that ISIS apologized to Israel back in 2017. ISIS fighters from Syria come into Israel to receive medical care when they get injured. So why is this going on? Well, for a lot of reasons. One is because ISIS constantly preoccupies Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. So Hezbollah in southern Lebanon is now preoccupied dealing with that. Same thing with Iran, preoccupied dealing with them in Iraq. Actually, Iran was one of the main was the main backer, was the main force weakening and stopping ISIS in Iraq. Iran was the main force doing that. All the while, of course, the CIA and the Mossad are like consistently backing these sort of groups. All the while. And this has been happening continuously. Now, during these protests right now that are happening in Iran, where are these ISIS fighters coming from? Well, a lot of them are coming from the borders crossing through Pakistan and Afghanistan. They're coming in trained by the CIA, with all this cool new American weapons to do whatever the hell they're doing, to just go on a murder spree. And then all of a sudden, once enough people are dead, the Western media is gonna talk about how evil the country is, and now how President Trump has to immediately intervene and stop the murder that the West, that the CIA, that the Mossad backed and instigated intentionally to justify a regime change operation. This has kind of been the history of the Middle East since Israel's inception. Truly, this has been the history of the Middle East. Find psycho extremist groups, create psycho extremist groups, arm them, train them, and then blame Arabs for these groups that they caused and use that as justification to do whatever the hell they want to do. That's basically been the last like what 70, 80 years of the Middle East's existence under American imperialism. And it seems like if something does happen to Iran and Israel and the United States do end up getting their way, we're just going to keep seeing more of that. It's actually things will only get indefinitely worse, because at that point you have Israeli hegemony of the Middle East. There's no existential threat to Israel anymore, the same way there is with Iran. And now you have all of these extremist groups that Israel created that also have a mind of their own, and Israel's going to continue to arm and fund them to weaken and to keep the Middle East as destabilized as possible, so Israel has justification to expand its borders. And you're going to have these extremist, radical, religious Israelis say they want everything from the river to the river, from the Nile to the Euphrates. And that's going to be the plan. There was actually, I'm surprised that Fox News had him on, but Fox News had Iran's foreign minister on recently to talk about these protests and about the fact that a lot of these individuals in the protests are trained opposition. You really don't need to believe anything Iran's foreign minister says. I'm not telling you to believe Iranian government officials, but it is interesting to listen to and the way he kind of brings it up. So take a listen to this.
Police officers burned them alive, they beheaded them, and they started shooting at police officers and also to the people. So as a result, for 3 days, we had, in fact, fighting against terrorists and not, with the protesters. It was completely a different story. The reason I have to explain, and this is important, why they started to shoot at people, for one reason, they wanted to increase the number of deaths. Why? Because President Trump has said that if there are killings, he would intervene. And they wanted to drag him into this conflict. And that was exactly an Israeli plot. They wanted to drag the president of the United States in this conflict. So they started to increase the number of deaths by killing ordinary people, by killing police officers, by starting a kind of, fighting inside the different cities.
So I'm going to stop there. Again, you really don't need to believe anything he says. I really don't believe any government official for that matter whatsoever. And I'm not trying to come out here being a propagandist for any country. What I'm saying is it logically makes sense. If Trump is threatening Iran, saying nonstop, if you're going to keep murdering people, we're going to go in and invade. Well, first off, Trump is using that as a pretext as well. He doesn't give a damn how many people are getting murdered in Iran. He doesn't give an absolute damn whatsoever. But Israel is going to hijack the opportunity to make itself look like the innocent victim. And it's going, and would it not? This is me hypothesizing. I can't state everything is fact just to not make sure I'm not violating guidelines. But wouldn't it benefit Israel geopolitically if as many Iranians as possible are hurt right now? Wouldn't that benefit Israel geopolitically? Because now you have an evil regime that needs to be overthrown, and you've built up the international outrage and incentive to do that. And wouldn't Iran recognize that by doing that, it's actually hurting itself, not just internally, the regime, but also internationally, it's going to expedite its own downfall. And would the Iranian regime be doing that knowing that that's what's going to happen? I mean, geopolitically, if you were Israel, you'd be like, yeah, let's just let's just put our Mossad in there. Let's blow up the whole damn place, make things as destabilized as possible. Then we'll have the United States go in and do all of our dirty work. And everything's done and fine and dandy, and now we finally took out our enemy. It's very logical when you take out the fact that none of these governments, none of these intel agencies operate with any sense of morality. Morality is not even a question when it comes to intelligence. Then they would do it. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. Let's keep listening to the rest of what that lady, Susan Miller, had to say, though.
to try to bring things down as CIA officers.
Everyone, most of the world, has a problem with Al Qaeda and ISIS Daesh.
Right. Right.
You have less of a problem
Everybody
because
does.
the CIA worked with ISIS Daesh and Al Qaeda.
If we worked with them, we would know what they were doing better, that's for sure, and understand it. If the plan is for us to work with them, to work on a security agreement, which we have done with enemies before, and we've played that part as well as side by side with the diplomats, honestly, and whatever other countries are involved. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that was happening, and I would call it possibly hopeful.
In fact, that's why the newspapers once in the United States celebrated Qasem Soleimani as a fighter with the American troops against ISIS and Al Qaeda.
He was, and now it's switched. Now we have to go to ISIS and Al Qaeda to go back against Iran.
That's crazy. I mean, she's just out there saying it. Truly, the brazenness of this lady. Again, this is Susan Miller, former CIA station chief, bragging about how she loves getting in fights with the Israelis. They're like best buddies, bickering like siblings. And, you know, now we'll just go in and make friends with ISIS. You know, that's what the lady is saying. Openly, just brazenly talking about it. Why doesn't New York Times, Washington Post, Fox News, CNN ever like showcase these videos? I'm not sure. Maybe it's because they are in alignment with the establishment. It's just kind of one and the same. They don't want the American public to know that, even though when they're asked, they have no problem just flat out saying it. John Kiriakou, who's more of a former CIA whistleblower, also has no problem honestly saying the truth, more so in disgust. This lady's saying it almost in, gloating about it. She's saying it with confidence. She's saying it as if she's proud of it. But that's what's going on. That's what's going on. That's what's been going on in the Middle East. So anyways, guys, that's really it for this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to support my channel, I'd appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button. Also, super gifts and chats help me do this as a full-time job, so I'd appreciate that.